Mark had always considered himself a practical guy. His job as a station technician wasn't glamorous, but it kept him busy. He liked the steady routine, fixing things, making sure the station ran smoothly, and staying out of the complicated politics that often came with intergalactic relations. But nothing in his quiet life had prepared him for the moment when Kira, the alien woman from RH first stepped into his workshop. It was a late evening shift, the kind where the station seemed to hum with an eerie quietness. Mark was hunched over a control panel, his hands busy with wires and buttons. He'd been working for hours, focused on getting the power grid back online. The station's systems had been glitching for days, and he was determined to fix it before it became a bigger problem. The soft buzz of the tools in his hands was the only sound, except for the distant hum of the station's core. Then he heard footsteps. At first, Mark thought it was just another technician coming to check on his progress, but when he turned, his breath caught in his throat. Standing at the entrance to the workshop was Kira, tall, with shimmering silver-blue skin and long, sleek black hair that seemed to move with a life of its own. Her eyes were an intense shade of violet, the kind of color that made you feel like you were being drawn into another world. She didn't look like anyone Mark had ever met before, and for a moment he was speechless. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice smooth, almost melodic as she crossed the threshold. Mark blinked, trying to shake off his surprise. Yeah, just a little. Glitchy, trying to fix the power grid. It's been acting up all day." Kira smiled softly, stepping closer to him. Her confidence radiated off her, a stark contrast to his usual quiet self. "I can see that, but you look like you're handling it." Mark let out a small laugh, trying to ease the tension he was feeling. "Well, I try my best. I'm Mark, by the way." "I know," she said, her smile widening as if she already knew everything about him. "I'm Kira. I've seen you around the station before. I'm with the delegation from RH. Mark's mind raced. He'd heard of RH, home to the Relarians, a race of strong, warrior-like beings. They were known for their fierce pride and intense loyalty, but Kira didn't quite fit the image he had in his mind. She didn't carry herself with the same intensity he'd heard described. Instead, she seemed calm, almost welcoming. "Well, I'm just about done here," Mark said, returning to the console. "You need something?" Kira shook her head, her eyes flickering over the equipment Mark was working on. "I don't need anything, but I'd like to watch you work. I've never seen someone fix a power grid from the inside." Mark's eyebrows shot up. "You want to watch?" She shrugged nonchalantly, her violet eyes twinkling with amusement. "You might be surprised. I find humans fascinating." He felt a little awkward under her gaze but pushed the feeling away. Sure. Well, this is a lot more complicated than it looks, but I'll try not to bore you." Kira stepped closer, folding her arms as she leaned against the workbench. She was still watching him, her expression intense, but there was a softness to her gaze now, something almost playful. "Humans always seem to make things seem easy. You handle technology with a grace that my people don't." Her voice was thoughtful, almost as if she was trying to piece something together in her mind. Mark chuckled nervously, the compliment catching him off guard. "Well, I'm used to it. I've been doing this job for years." "You make it look effortless," Kira said. Her eyes never left him as he worked, but there was something in her gaze that made Mark pause for a moment. It wasn't the usual curiosity he saw from the other delegates who'd visited the station. This was different. It was as though she was studying him, learning something about him. Finally, after several minutes of silence, Mark finished the last connection and stood back. The power grid flickered to life, the hum of the station's systems returning to normal. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, turning to Kira with a relieved smile. "There, should be good for now." She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. It wasn't the playful smile from earlier. This one was softer, more genuine. "You know," she began, her tone light but sincere, "I wish you were my husband." Mark blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected her to say that. Was she joking? Kira seemed to notice the surprise in his eyes and tilted her head, her smile turning teasing. "You're not as surprised as I thought you'd be." I didn't expect that," Mark said, trying to process what she meant. "You know, I'm just a guy who fixes things." She laughed lightly, stepping closer until there was only a small distance between them. "You're more than that, Mark. You don't just fix things, you fix problems, and that's a quality I admire. Besides," she added, her voice turning playful again, "if I had someone like you around, I might not have to worry about anything breaking ever again." Mark felt a smile tug at his lips, warmth spreading through him at her words. "Well, I'll do my best to keep things running smoothly." Kira's smile softened, and for the first time, Mark saw a different side to her. A side that wasn't just a warrior, but someone who appreciated the small things in life. "You already do, Mark," she said quietly. "You already do." And in that moment, Mark realized something he hadn't fully acknowledged before. There was something about Kira that had drawn him in, something beyond the alien beauty she held, something that made him feel more. The days after their first meeting were filled with quiet anticipation for Mark. His shift on the station had become something of a routine, but every time he saw Kira, something in him shifted. She seemed to be everywhere, sometimes in the hallways, other times near the observation deck. Each time their paths crossed, she would offer him a smile, and every time Mark felt a spark he couldn't ignore. Mark had always been good at fixing things, but with Kira, it was different. There was a softness in the way she spoke to him, the way she looked at him that made him feel like he wasn't just another technician. He wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but something about her words lingered in his mind. The playful way she'd said, "I wish you were my husband." He couldn't shake the thought. It wasn't something Kira had said lightly. Mark could see it in her eyes, she had meant it. He wondered what had drawn her to him. Was it just his skill with machines, or was there something more? Something he couldn't quite put his finger on. On his next break, Mark found himself walking to the station's observation deck, hopping to clear his head. He wasn't expecting to see anyone, but as he rounded the corner, there she was, Kira, standing by the large windows, gazing out at the stars. The dim light of the station bathed her in a soft glow, her silver-blue skin shimmering like she belonged to the cosmos itself. He stopped for a moment, just watching her. There was something so calming about the way she stood, so at peace, despite the strength in her posture. Mark wondered how someone who had fought so many battles could find peace in something so simple as stargazing. Without thinking, he approached her. "Do you mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice slightly hesitant but filled with genuine curiosity. Kira turned her head slowly, her violet eyes meeting his. She didn't smile right away, but there was a warmth in her gaze that made Mark feel welcome. "Not at all," she said, her voice soft and steady. "I've been waiting for you." Mark raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Waiting for me?" She nodded, stepping aside slightly so he could join her by the window. "You seemed like someone who needed to see the stars. I've been watching you work on the station for days. You fix things, but you've never really looked up." Mark couldn't help but laugh. "I guess you're right. I get so focused on fixing stuff that I forget to just stop and look at the bigger picture." They both turned their attention to the stars outside. The vastness of space stretched before them, an endless sea of shining lights. It was breathtaking in a way that made the daily chaos of the station feel insignificant. "So," Mark began after a few moments of comfortable silence, "what about you? You seem to know more about the stars than I do." Kira's smile softened as she looked up at the sky. "My people have always looked to the stars. They're our way of navigating, our way of remembering. For me, the stars are a reminder of my journey, a journey that's not always easy, but one that has brought me here." Mark could hear the weight in her words, the layers of experience she carried with her. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Kira nodded slowly, her eyes drifting toward the glowing stars. "More than I care to remember. My people are warriors, Mark. We fight to protect, but sometimes that means losing pieces of ourselves along the way. Mark stood closer to her now, their shoulders almost touching. He wasn't sure what it was, but something about her vulnerability made him feel protective. He wanted to understand her more, to make her feel safe, to show her that she didn't have to carry everything alone. "You don't have to fight anymore," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "Not here, not with me." She turned to him, her gaze intense but warm. "It's not that simple. I'm a warrior. I've been trained to fight my entire life. And even though I'm here on this peaceful station, it's hard to forget who I am." Mark smiled, a gentle smile, his eyes soft. "I get it. You've been a warrior, but I think just maybe you deserve more than fighting. You deserve peace," and he paused, feeling his heart pound in his chest. He wasn't sure where the words were coming from, but they felt right. "And maybe even someone who sees you for more than your past." Kira looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face, as though she was weighing his words carefully. She didn't say anything at first, but when she did, it was in a soft, almost shy tone. "You're different, Mark. You don't look at me the way others do. You don't see just a warrior, you see me." Mark felt a warmth spread through his chest. He didn't know exactly what it was. Maybe it was the honesty in her words or the way she looked at him. But he knew this moment would change everything. "I see you, Kira," he said simply, his hand brushing against hers. "And I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes softened, and for the first time Mark saw something in her he hadn't before: hope. It was the smallest spark, but it was there, deep in her violet eyes. And in that moment he realized that he would do whatever it took to make that hope grow. Kira turned to him, her smile soft and genuine. "You know, I didn't expect to meet someone like you," she said, her voice filled with both surprise and admiration. "But I'm glad I did." Mark's heart swelled. "I'm glad too." And as they stood there, side by side, watching the stars above, the future suddenly seemed filled with possibility. The next few days felt different. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between him and Kira. There was an unspoken connection that lingered in the air whenever they were together, something neither of them had fully understood yet, but both of them could feel. Their shared time had been full of light-hearted moments, quiet conversations, and the occasional stolen glance. Mark had been hoping for a deeper connection, but he hadn't expected it to come this naturally. Kira had been a presence on the station for weeks, always in control, always the warrior. But the more time Mark spent with her, the more he saw her vulnerability, the part of her that had never fully healed from her battles, both physical and emotional. It was clear that, despite her strength, there was so much more to her than the warrior's exterior. She was kind, thoughtful, and she carried a deep sadness, one that Mark wanted to help lift if he could. Today, they were taking a break from their usual tasks. Mark was tinkering with some equipment in the station's main engine room, making minor repairs. Kira had joined him for the first time, offering to help, though she wasn't entirely sure of what she was doing. The sight of Kira, the fearless warrior, hunched over with a wrench in hand, trying to fix machinery, made Mark smile. He had never seen her in such a relaxed position before. "I don't know why I'm doing this," Kira muttered under her breath, her brow furrowed as she tried to unscrew a stubborn panel. "I've fought in countless battles, but this is beyond me." Mark chuckled, glancing up from his work. "Don't worry, Kira. If you can handle a sword, you can handle a wrench." She shot him a playful glare, her lips twitching with amusement. "I can't even get this stupid panel open." Mark moved over to her side, his smile easy and warm. "Let me help." He gently took the wrench from her hand and unscrewed the panel with one smooth motion. "You've got to twist it just right. Sometimes they get stuck when they're not used regularly." Kira raised an eyebrow at him, her tone teasing. "You make this look too easy. You really know your way around machines, don't you?" Mark shrugged, his grin widening. "Well, I've been doing this since I was a kid. I was always the one fixing things at home. It just kind of stuck with me." I bet it did, Kira said, leaning in closer to watch him work. You're good at it. It's impressive, Mark, how you make something broken whole again. You've got a skill I respect. Mark felt a rush of warmth at her compliment, a little embarrassed but flattered nonetheless. I think it's more about patience than skill, he said with a light laugh. You've got to take your time with things. That's how you fix them. Kira was quiet for a moment, her gaze lingering on him. That's a good way to think about it, she murmured. I've spent so much of my life fighting, always rushing to the next battle, the next victory. I never took the time to fix anything, not even myself. Mark's expression softened, and for the first time he noticed how tired Kira looked. Her eyes, usually full of intensity, seemed a little dimmer now, like a fire that had burned too long without a chance to rest. You're not broken, Kira, Mark said quietly, his voice sincere. You just need time and you don't have to keep fighting everything. Not anymore. Kira looked at him, her lips parted slightly as though she wanted to say something but didn't know how. After a moment, she simply nodded. I know, it's just hard to let go sometimes. Mark reached out, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. You don't have to do it alone, you know. I'm here for you, Kira. The words hung in the air between them. Kira's eyes softened, and for the first time she allowed herself to fully meet his gaze. There was a vulnerability there, something raw and real. She wasn't hiding behind the tough exterior anymore. I've never had anyone say that to me before, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Not like that. Mark gave her a small, reassuring smile. I mean it. You don't have to carry everything by yourself. We're in this together. Kira's lips curved up just a little, and for the first time Mark saw her truly smile. Not the guarded smile of a warrior, but something genuine, something that reached her eyes. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I think I'm starting to believe you. The air between them felt different, lighter now. Mark felt a wave of relief wash over him. Maybe this was the beginning of something real, something they could both hold on to. They stood there for a few moments, side by side, the quiet hum of the station and the soft sound of the machinery around them the only noise. Without thinking, Mark leaned in just slightly and brushed a strand of hair behind Kira's ear. She looked up at him, her heart racing, but she didn't pull away. There was something in her gaze that told him she was ready to take a chance on this, on him, on them. You know, you really do have a way with fixing things, Kira said, breaking the silence with her soft, teasing tone. Mark chuckled. Yeah, well, I try. She stepped closer, her body just inches away from his now. You fix something else too, she said quietly, her voice low, almost shy. Mark's pulse quickened at the unspoken meaning in her words. What's that? He asked, his voice thick with anticipation. Kira's lips curled into a smile. You fixed me. The air between them grew still, the moment full of promise and possibility. Mark reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek as he leaned in. This time when their lips met, it was slow, deliberate, a promise without words. When they pulled away, Kira's eyes were softer than he had ever seen them. I think we're both ready to fix what's broken, she whispered. Mark smiled, his heart full. Together. The days after their quiet, lingering kiss were a blur of new possibilities. Mark and Kira had stepped into something that neither of them fully understood but both were eager to explore. Every moment they spent together, whether it was fixing machinery or simply sitting in silence, felt like a small victory. Mark knew that it wasn't going to be easy. There were too many unanswered questions between them, but he also knew that it was worth it. Worth every second. They spent the next few days working side by side. Mark found that he enjoyed being with her in a way that was different from anything he had felt before. It wasn't just the warmth of her presence or her sharp intelligence, but the way she saw him, not just as a human, but as someone who mattered. Today, they were back in the observation room, looking out at the stars once again. The station had a quiet beauty to it in the evening. Lights from distant planets twinkled in the far distance. While the station's artificial sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. Mark and Kira stood side by side, close enough that their arms brushed occasionally, but neither of them had moved to close the gap. "Do you ever miss it?" Mark asked, his voice low. "Home, I mean." Kira glanced at him, her violet eyes soft. "I do," she admitted, "but home isn't just a place, it's who you share it with." Mark felt his heart race a little as the words settled between them. Home. It was a word that had always felt strange to him, something that had changed over the years. For the longest time, home had been Earth, the place he grew up, the streets, the small house with his family. But now, standing beside Kira, he felt that maybe home didn't need to be a place at all. Maybe it was just where the heart felt safe. "I guess that's true," Mark said softly, glancing out at the stars. "For me, I've always thought home was wherever I could fix things, wherever I could make things work." Kira tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly in curiosity. "And is that enough for you, just fixing things?" Mark smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe not anymore, I think. Maybe I've been looking for something more." Kira didn't respond immediately, but Mark could feel her eyes on him, studying him with the same intensity she had when they first met. "You want to fix more than machines now?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face her fully, his heart pounding. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady but filled with meaning. "I want to fix this, what's between us. I don't know where it's going, but I want to figure it out with you." Kira's lips parted as though she were going to say something, but then she stopped herself. Her gaze softened, and for a moment Mark thought she might back away, but instead she reached out, touching his arm gently. The gesture was simple, yet it felt like everything. "I think I'd like that too," she said, her voice low and warm. "I've been running for so long, I didn't think I could ever stop. But with you, Mark, it feels like maybe I don't have to." Mark's chest tightened at her words. He had always known there was something special about her, something he couldn't ignore. But now, standing here, hearing her say those words, it made everything feel more real. "I don't want you to run anymore, Kira," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "You don't have to, not with me." Her eyes searched his face, and for a moment Mark thought she might pull away. But instead, she stepped closer, her body nearly touching his now. He could feel the warmth of her presence, the electric connection that had been building between them ever since they first met. "I'm not used to letting someone in," Kira admitted, her voice barely audible. "But with you, I think I'm ready to try." Mark's heart skipped a beat, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch her cheek. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, Kira. We'll take it one step at a time." For the first time since they'd met, Kira smiled, a genuine, full smile that made Mark's breath catch in his chest. She nodded slowly, her hand reaching out to gently take his. "One step at a time," she repeated, her voice filled with the kind of warmth that melted all the tension between them. Mark couldn't help but smile back. "Together, right?" Kira squeezed his hand, stepping even closer to him now. Her breath was warm against his skin as she leaned in slightly, her eyes locked on his. "Together," she whispered. And without thinking, without hesitation, Mark closed the small gap between them, his lips gently pressing against hers. It wasn't a passionate kiss, not one filled with urgency, but it was full of something deeper, a promise, a beginning. When they finally pulled away, both of them stood there, breathing a little faster, their foreheads touching in a quiet, intimate gesture. Kira's voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "I think we've got something worth holding on to here, Mark." "I think we do," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'm not letting go." They stood there, side by side, hand in hand, the stars twinkling above them. Mark knew that the future was uncertain, but with Kira by his side, everything felt possible. The next few days seemed to pass by in a blur for Mark. The feeling of Kira's hand in his lingered long after they'd shared that quiet kiss. Something had shifted between them, and every time their eyes met, Mark felt like they were both navigating uncharted territory. For the first time in a long time, He wasn't worried about the destination. He was just happy to be on the journey. As the days wore on, they grew closer. The light moments of teasing and laughter returned, and so did the quiet conversations about their pasts. Kira had always been a bit guarded, revealing little about her life before she arrived at the station, but slowly she began to open up to Mark. She talked about her planet, RH, about the harsh environments, the battles, and the culture of her people. But she also spoke about her dreams, the things she'd always wanted to experience beyond the walls of a warrior's life. Mark listened, truly listened. He wasn't just hearing the words, he was understanding them. And in return, he shared his own life with her, his childhood, his time on Earth, the way his family had taught him to be resourceful and kind. They connected in a way Mark hadn't thought possible. She had become not just someone to care for, but someone to truly understand. One afternoon, after finishing another round of station repairs, Mark found himself in the cafeteria. He wasn't expecting to see Kira there, but when he walked in, he spotted her at a table by the window. She was staring out at the stars, a faraway look in her eyes, lost in thought. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "Mind if I join you?" Kira looked up, her violet eyes lighting up when she saw him. She smiled, motioning to the empty seat across from her. "Not at all." Mark sat down, taking a moment to appreciate the comfort of her company. The hum of the station was faint in the background, and the peaceful silence between them felt natural, unlike the tension he once felt in her presence. "Thinking about something?" he asked, gently probing. Kira's smile faded a little, her expression turning thoughtful. "Just the future," she said quietly. "It's strange, Mark. I've spent my whole life fighting. I've never really had time to think about what comes after that, what comes after I'm done fighting, and maybe even after the stars stop being just a battleground." Mark's heart ached at the sadness in her voice, though he knew it wasn't just the stars she was talking about. It was her. "You don't have to keep fighting, Kira. You can choose something else now, a different path, a better path." She met his eyes, the corners of her mouth turning up into a faint, unsure smile. "And what if I don't know how? What if there's nothing else for me?" Mark reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "There's always something else. It's just a matter of taking the first step, and you don't have to take it alone." Kira's fingers curled around his, the warmth of her touch sending a pleasant shiver up his arm. "I'm not used to this. To us. It feels different, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to fully let go of the past yet." Mark squeezed her hand gently, his voice soft but firm. "Then we'll take it slow, one step at a time. You don't have to rush, but I'm here, Kira, and I'll be here no matter what." For a long moment, Kira didn't speak. She just looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to see if he truly meant it. Then her smile widened, more genuine than before, and she leaned in slightly. "I'm starting to believe you, Mark," she said quietly. I think you might be right." The words, simple as they were, meant more to Mark than he could put into words. Kira had been through so much, and to hear her say that, to see her trust him enough to open up, made his heart swell. He hadn't expected any of this. He hadn't expected to find someone like Kira, someone who would make him believe in something more than just survival, more than just fixing things. She made him believe in living. "Well, if you think I'm right, maybe we should get out of here," Mark said, his voice teasing but warm. "Go for a walk. Maybe find a place where we can see the stars without all the station lights in the way." Kira's eyes sparkled at the suggestion. "You're always full of ideas, aren't you?" "I try," he said with a grin. "I mean, why spend another night on the station when we could make our own adventure?" Kira leaned back in her chair, laughing softly. "All right, human, lead the way." Mark stood up, offering her his hand. She took it without hesitation, standing up beside him. As they walked toward the door, Mark felt something light and exciting in the air, a sense of freedom, of possibility. He didn't know exactly where their journey would take them, but with Kira by his side, he knew that it would be something worth taking the risk for. The night sky outside was dark, the stars more brilliant and beautiful than he'd ever seen them. It felt like the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what would come next. And as they stepped outside, Mark realized that, for the first time in a long time, he didn't need to have all the answers. He just needed to be there, for Kira, for himself, for whatever came next. Together, the days on the station had taken on a rhythm Mark found himself growing accustomed to. There was a comforting routine to them: work, shared meals, quiet conversations. But something else was happening too. The connection between him and Kira had deepened, and each day they spent together felt more like a promise than a passing moment. They weren't just coworkers anymore. They were partners. Kira had become someone Mark couldn't imagine his life without. She had opened up to him in ways that surprised both of them. She wasn't just the fierce warrior from RH Thon. She was someone who had dreams, hopes, and like anyone else, a past full of experiences that had shaped her. The more Mark learned about her, the more he admired her strength. And the more he realized that just maybe they could be something together, something real. This afternoon was different. The station was quieter than usual. Most of the crew had either finished their shifts or were off on another task, and Mark had the rare chance to just be with Kira. They'd been working non-stop for the past week, fixing equipment, and dealing with a minor power failure in the station's lower levels. It had been exhausting, but now, for the first time in days, they had a moment to just breathe. "I can't believe we're finally off duty," Mark said, stretching as they walked into the station's lounge. "I thought I was going to lose my mind with all the repairs." Kira smiled at him, her violet eyes softening. "You've got a way of making even fixing machines sound like an adventure." Mark chuckled, plopping down onto one of the lounge chairs. "I suppose everything's an adventure when you're on a station like this. But honestly, it's nice to just sit here and not worry about anything for once." Kira nodded, taking a seat next to him. The quiet of the lounge felt peaceful. The view of the stars from the windows was mesmerizing, and for a moment they just sat there, lost in the beauty of space. Mark looked over at Kira, who was gazing out the window, her expression thoughtful. There was something about the way she carried herself, both strong and vulnerable, that made Mark want to protect her. But more than that, it made him want to be her safe space. He wasn't sure what had shifted between them, but whatever it was, he felt it deeply. "You know," Mark said quietly, breaking the silence, "I'm glad you're here, with me, on the station." Kira turned to look at him, her lips curving into a gentle smile. "I'm glad, too. I wasn't sure how I'd fit in, to be honest. After everything, I've always been used to standing alone." Mark leaned forward slightly, his voice low and sincere. "You don't have to stand alone anymore, Kira. You've got me." The weight of his words hung in the air for a moment. Kira's eyes softened, and she seemed to contemplate his statement before speaking again. "It's not easy for me," she admitted. "I've been a warrior all my life. I was taught to fight and never show weakness, but with you, it's different. I'm starting to realize that maybe there's more to life than just fighting, and maybe, just maybe, I don't have to fight alone anymore." Mark reached over, his hand gently brushing hers. "You don't have to fight alone, not with me. I'll always be here for you." Kira's fingers curled around his, her touch warm and steady. She looked down at their hands, and Mark saw the vulnerability in her eyes. "I didn't think I could ever let anyone in, but I trust you, Mark. I never thought I'd say that to anyone, but with you, I feel like I can breathe." Mark's heart skipped a beat, his chest swelling with emotion. "Kira," he whispered, his voice thick with the sincerity of his words, "I trust you too. I've never met anyone like you. You're strong, but you're also kind. And you deserve everything. You don't have to be alone anymore, not with me." Kira's gaze met his, and for a moment the world outside seemed to disappear. There was nothing but the two of them, sitting together in that quiet moment. Slowly, she leaned in, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was soft and tender. No rush, no pressure, just a gentle promise. When they pulled away, Kira rested her forehead against his, her breath warm against his skin. "I never thought I'd find this," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think I could find someone who would make me feel whole." Mark's hand gently cupped her cheek, and he smiled. "I don't know about whole, but I'll do my best to make you feel like you're not alone. You don't have to carry everything by yourself, Kira. I'm here." She closed her eyes for a moment, a peaceful expression on her face, as if she were finally allowing herself to believe his words. "I don't know what the future holds," she said quietly, "but I think we'll figure it out, together." Mark's heart soared. He didn't need to know the future right now. With Kira by his side, he knew they could face anything that came their way. "Together," he echoed, his voice filled with warmth and certainty. As they sat there, holding hands, looking out at the stars, Mark felt an overwhelming sense of peace. They didn't have all the answers, and there were still obstacles ahead, but for the first time he wasn't afraid. With Kira, he knew they could build something real, something that went beyond fixing machines or surviving. They could build a life together, one step at a time. And that was more than enough. The next few days on the station felt like they were moving in a slow dance, one that neither Mark nor Kira had ever experienced before. There was a rhythm to their interactions now, simple things like shared meals, late-night talks, and the easy comfort of each other's company. The tension between them had dissolved into something more meaningful. It was a connection, quiet but undeniable, and neither of them wanted to let it go. Mark found himself waking up each day with a sense of anticipation. No longer was he just going through the motions of his work. He was building something, something real with Kira. And with every conversation, every touch, he realized just how much he had come to care for her. But there was still one thing that lingered in the back of his mind. What came next? They hadn't really discussed what their relationship meant. They hadn't labeled it. They hadn't talked about what would happen beyond their small moments together. It was all so new. That afternoon, Mark was in the station's maintenance bay, making a few final tweaks to some equipment when Kira found him, her footsteps echoing through the empty hall. She was always so sure of herself, but there was something different in the way she walked toward him today, a little softer, a little more unsure. It caught Mark's attention immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag and setting down the tools he'd been using. Kira nodded, but there was a hesitation in her expression. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of nervousness that Mark had never heard before. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He could tell this was important. He stepped closer to her. "About what?" "About us," Kira answered, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him feel exposed. She took a deep breath as if gathering her thoughts. "I don't know what this is, Mark. What we are. I've never been good at this kind of thing. My people, we're warriors. We don't do relationships like this." Her voice softened, and there was a rawness to it that pulled at his heart. "But with you, I feel something I've never felt before." Mark reached out, his hand gently brushing against hers, his thumb tracing the soft line of her skin. "What are you trying to say, Kira?" "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice low. "I've been running from everything for so long. I don't know how to stay. I don't know how to let someone in." Mark's chest tightened. He had known there were scars, but hearing her voice break with that admission hit him harder than he expected. He stepped closer, not wanting to let her pull away, wanting to show her that she didn't need to be afraid anymore. "You don't have to be scared, Kira," he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet certainty. "I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this is, we can figure it out together. You don't have to run anymore. I won't let you." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if she was trying to decide if she could believe him. The moment stretched on, and for the first time, Mark saw the full weight of what Kira had carried with her. The burdens of a warrior's life, the fear of losing herself in someone else, the fear of trusting. Kira finally exhaled, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You really mean that, don't you?" she whispered. "I do," Mark said, his voice steady. "I'm here for the long haul. Whatever happens, I'm in this with you." Kira's smile grew, and the warmth in her eyes made Mark's heart race. She reached up, her hand cupping his face gently, her touch like the brush of silk. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was like the whole world had faded away, leaving just the two of them standing there. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "I never thought I could let someone in," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "But with you, I feel safe. Maybe I don't need to fight anymore." Mark closed his eyes for a brief moment, savoring the closeness between them. "You don't have to fight, Kira. Not with me. Not anymore." And then, in a moment that felt like time itself held its breath, Kira kissed him. It wasn't the fiery, passionate kiss of two people lost in desire. It was slower, softer, like two souls meeting for the first time, like they were both learning how to trust again. Mark wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss as the weight of everything between them melted away. When they finally pulled apart, Kira rested her head against his chest, and Mark held her there, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm ready to stop running," she whispered. Mark's smile was gentle but full of emotion. "Then let's go forward, together." For the first time in a long while, Mark didn't feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. With Kira, he felt lighter, like the stars outside were shining brighter, like there was a future worth reaching for. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And as Kira lifted her head to look at him, her eyes full of trust, Mark knew that this was only the beginning of something incredible.